You ever have one of those moments where you blink and everything you love is just gone? That was me standing on a muddy lakeshore staring at the empty patch of land where my cabin used to be. No walls, no porch, no roof, just a few splintered boards sticking out of the dirt and a big ugly sign that read, Lakeside Estates HOA property, no trespassing. At first I thought I had the wrong spot. Maybe I parked at the wrong bend in the lake road. Maybe someone else's lot got cleared. But then I saw it, the old stone step my father laid by hand 20 years ago. The one we carved our initials into. That's when it hit me. My cabin wasn't gone by accident, it was demolished. My throat tightened. That cabin wasn't just a structure, it was the last piece of my dad I had left. We built it together when I was a teenager. Every nail, every plank, every stubborn repair we did with our own hands. After he passed, it became my escape, my peace. And now, nothing but wreckage and silence. I took a shaky breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed the number posted on the HOA's sign. My voice was trembling, not from fear, from fury. Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association, this is Denise speaking, came a chipper, almost robotic voice. Yeah, Denise, I said tightly. This is Thomas Hale. I'm standing on my lot at 52C. My cabin is gone. Care to explain that? There was a short pause, the kind that tells you someone just realized they might have messed up before she spoke again. Oh, Mr. Hale, right, yes, the structure removal. The board approved that last week. It wasn't in compliance with HOA standards. I froze. Removal, you mean demolition? You demolished my property. Well, technically, yes, she said, in the kind of tone you'd use to explain a parking ticket. It was classified as an unapproved build. We sent several notices. I own this land outright, I snapped. I'm not even part of your HOA. Your jurisdiction ends at the subdivision gate. Her tone hardened instantly. Sir, our bylaws extend 300 feet beyond the community boundary. Your cabin was within that buffer zone. The board voted unanimously to have it removed. I could hear papers rustling in the background like she was reading from some script. You tore down a private residence without a court order. I asked, barely keeping my voice calm. Our board operates within county code, she said flatly. If you wish to appeal, you may attend next month's meeting, but threats and hostility will not. I hung up before she could finish, not because I was done, but because if I kept listening, I might have driven straight to their office and said something I'd regret. Instead, I stood there, staring at the spot where my dad's old workbench used to sit, where we'd fixed fishing rods and told dumb jokes. Now all I could see was a pile of shattered memories. But as the anger settled into something colder, something sharper, I started thinking. The HOA claimed their jurisdiction extended 300 feet. That was wrong. I knew the county zoning maps by heart. I had personally signed off on the survey lines for Lakeside Estates 5 years ago. Their boundary stopped exactly 162 feet from my lot. And I would know because I'm not just Thomas Hale, random cabin owner. I'm Thomas Hale, county senior building inspector. Yeah, the same guy who enforces the codes, reviews the permits, and oversees every HOA development project in the county. And these fools had just bulldozed a county-approved structure without a permit, without notice, and without jurisdiction. I took photos of the wreckage from every angle. Date stamps, GPS coordinates, evidence. My phone's camera clicked like a metronome as I documented every splintered beam and broken foundation line. Then I spotted something that made my stomach twist, a set of fresh tire tracks. Big ones, heavy-duty, probably from the demolition crew. They led up to the cabin site, stopped abruptly near the edge of the lake, then turned back toward the road. Right beside them, half buried in the mud, was a crumpled invoice. The company header read, Merrill Construction and Maintenance, contracted by Lakeside Estates HOA. Bingo. I pocketed it, knowing I'd just found my first piece of evidence. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind whip across the water. The anger in me wasn't just about the cabin anymore. It was about the arrogance, the entitlement, the idea that some board of neighborhood busybodies thought they could just destroy something that wasn't theirs and hide behind a few fancy bylaws. They thought they could get away with it. But here's the thing about me. I don't just follow building codes, I wrote half of them. And now I was about to use every single one of those rules to make them pay. I drove back into town that afternoon, still seething but calm enough to plan. My first stop was the county records office. If the HOA had filed anything, demolition requests, permits, land boundary amendments, it would be there. The clerk, a friend of mine named Janelle, looked up as I walked in. Tom, you look like you're about to arrest someone. Not yet, I said, but I might. What happened? Lakeside HOA demolished my cabin, said it was out of compliance. She blinked. Wait, your cabin by Miller's Creek, that's not even under their zone. Exactly, I said, leaning on the counter. Can you check if they filed any demolition permits recently? She typed for a moment, then frowned. Nothing from them in the last 6 months. No demo permits, no land amendments, nothing. My jaw tightened. So they didn't just make a mistake, they did it illegally. Janelle looked nervous. Tom, if they took down private property without county authorization, they're in a lot more trouble than they realize. I grabbed the printouts and walked out the door with one thought echoing in my mind. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. This was about holding power accountable. They wanted to play by their own rules? Fine, I'd play by mine, the ones with legal teeth. Because when you destroy a man's home and think you can hide behind red tape, you'd better hope he's not the one who enforces it. As the sun dipped behind the trees and the lake turned gold, I stood at the edge of the road overlooking the ruins one more time. My father's voice echoed faintly in my head. "Stand your ground, son. Don't let bullies take what's yours." I whispered back. "I won't, Dad, not this time." And with that, I started my truck, turned toward the HOA's pristine little subdivision, and smiled. They had no idea who they'd just picked a fight with. When I got back to my truck, I already had a plan forming in my head. You don't spend 15 years inspecting construction sites without learning how to investigate quietly. First things first, find the decision maker. Every HOA has one, the self-appointed queen who treats a neighborhood like her personal kingdom. At Lakeside Estates, her name was Karen Whitmore. Yeah, that kind of Karen. She'd been HOA president for almost a decade, and word around town was she ran the place like a dictatorship. She'd find people for having garden gnomes that clashed with the community aesthetic and threatened to sue a family for painting their door turquoise. So when I saw her name on the demolition invoice, signed with a bold, loopy signature right above, authorized by HOA president, I knew exactly who to talk to first. The next morning I drove through the iron gates of Lakeside Estates. It felt like entering a different world. Manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, expensive SUVs gleaming in driveways. Every house screamed money and control. I parked by the HOA office, a glassy little building near the clubhouse, and walked in. A young woman at the desk looked up, startled. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked. "Yeah," I said calmly. "I need to speak with Mrs. Whitmore. It's about a property matter." She hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but she'll want to see me." The woman gave me that tight, nervous smile people give when they sense trouble but don't want to get involved. She disappeared through a side door. A moment later, a voice called out, sharp and commanding, "Send him in." Karen Whitmore sat behind a polished oak desk, wearing a pastel blazer and pearls that probably cost more than my truck. She didn't bother to stand up when I entered. "Mr. Hale," she said, looking over her glasses. "I was expecting your call sooner." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because I was expecting to find a cabin on my property, not a pile of debris." She gave a fake smile. "Yes, about that. I understand this has been emotional for you, but the board made a unanimous decision." The structure was not in compliance with HOA guidelines. I stared at her. "You mean your guidelines, not the law?" Her smile faded just a bit. "We have jurisdiction over all properties bordering community land. That includes yours." I pulled a folded map from my jacket pocket and laid it on her desk. "This is the official county zoning map, signed, sealed, and certified. The HOA boundary ends here." I tapped the red line. "My property begins here. You see the difference." She leaned in, squinting. "That can't be right, our surveyor said." "I'm the county building inspector," I interrupted. "I wrote this map." Her expression froze just for a second. Then she leaned back, trying to recover her composure. "Be that as it may, Mr. Hale, your structure was never approved by our architectural committee. It violated several community standards." "It wasn't your community," I cut in again. "You demolished a private county-approved residence without a single permit or court order. That's not a violation. That's a crime." Her nostrils flared. "Watch your tone, Mr. Hale. The board acted within its rights. If you'd like to file a complaint, you may do so in writing." I almost laughed. "Oh, I'll file something, but it won't be a complaint. It'll be a code enforcement report. Every one of your properties, every inspection you've signed off on, I'm reopening them all." That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed, voice dropping. "You wouldn't dare." I leaned forward, my voice low and cold. "You tore down my home, the one place my father and I built together. You had no jurisdiction, no permit, and no clue who you were dealing with. So yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I dare." We stared at each other in silence. Then she smirked. "Well, Mr. Hale, good luck with that, because everything we do here is by the book. And if you think your position gives you power over this community, you'll find we have friends in county offices, too." I didn't blink. "Then they'll fall with you." I turned to leave, but her voice followed me like a snake's hiss. "You can't intimidate me, Mr. Hale. This is a respectable neighborhood. You'll regret making enemies here." I paused at the door and glanced back. "Funny thing about enemies, Karen, I tend to inspect their houses first." Outside, I finally exhaled. My pulse was still pounding, but I could feel the tide turning. I had proof of illegal demolition, no permits on file, and now confirmation that Karen herself authorized it. Time to make her sweat. That afternoon, I started pulling records, property files, HOA filings, and past complaints. I called in a favor from Janelle at the records office. Within hours, she sent me copies of every permit Lakeside Estates had filed in the past 3 years, and what I found made my jaw drop. At least 4 of the luxury homes by the lake had been built without final inspection approval. 2 had expired electrical permits. 1 had an unlicensed contractor listed. And another, the biggest one, was registered under Corinne Whitmore's husband's construction company. It was textbook corruption. They'd been skipping permits, cutting corners, and covering it all up under the HOA's name. By the time I finished reading, I wasn't angry anymore, I was focused. Cold, methodical. If Corinne thought she could bully people under fake authority, it was time she learned what real authority looked like. I grabbed my county ID, slid it into my jacket, and started drafting official notices for on-site inspection. Tomorrow, I'd walk through every one of those million-dollar homes, and when I found violations, and I knew I would, they'd be fined, cited, and possibly condemned. And the best part? There wasn't a damn thing the HOA could do to stop me. That night, as I stood by the lake watching the moon reflect off the dark water, I couldn't help but smile bitterly. My cabin was gone, but this was just the beginning. Corinne had no idea that the man she'd crossed wasn't just another homeowner. He was the law she pretended to enforce. And tomorrow, the Queen of Lakeside Estates was about to watch her little kingdom start to crumble. If someone destroyed your home and tried to justify it with rules, how would you handle it? Would you confront them like Tom did, or go straight for legal revenge? The next morning, I put on my county-issued jacket, clipped my ID badge to my belt, and loaded my inspection kit into the truck. I wasn't just going to confront the HOA anymore, I was going to expose them. Every law they'd broken, every corner they'd cut, every homeowner they'd intimidated, I'd find it. And I'd do it by the book. I started with the largest house on Lakeside Drive, a sprawling white mansion overlooking the water, complete with marble columns and a private HOA president's residence sign by the gate. Of course, it was Corinne's house. As I stepped out of my truck, her husband, a tall man in a golf shirt with a beer gut and too much confidence, was standing by the front steps. He gave me a once-over and scoffed. "You lost, pal. This is private property." I flashed my badge. "County Building Inspector." "I'm here to review recent permits and structural compliance." He frowned. "We didn't schedule anything." "Funny," I said, flipping open my clipboard, "because according to county records, this property has 3 open permits, 1 expired electrical, 1 unapproved deck expansion, and 1 uninspected foundation add-on, all overdue." His jaw tightened. "Look, I'm a contractor. I know the rules." I smiled thinly. "Then you know ignoring a reinspection order is a violation punishable by fine, or in some cases, criminal negligence if it affects safety." He crossed his arms, trying to tower over me. "You here to play tough guy or do your job?" I didn't flinch. "Doing my job is playing tough guy when people like you build without oversight." Before he could respond, the front door opened, and there she was, Corinne Whitmore herself, in all her pastel perfection. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice sugary sweet but dripping with venom. "I wasn't aware of any scheduled visits today." "That's because you weren't supposed to be," I replied calmly. "Routine inspection, county procedure." She forced a smile, stepping onto the porch. "You're abusing your position. This is harassment." "Harassment," I echoed. "Corinne, you demolished my property. I'm simply inspecting yours, which, by the way, hasn't passed a single compliance check since 2021. Her mask cracked for a second. I could see it, that flash of panic in her eyes. Then she composed herself. "I'll have my lawyer contact the county office." "Please do," I said, turning toward the foundation. "He can join us during the review." For the next hour, I inspected every corner of that house, foundation cracks, unapproved electrical work, a massive deck expansion that jutted halfway toward the lake. I took photos, measurements, and notes, and the more I looked, the worse it got. Whoever built this thing had used cheap, unsafe materials, the kind that wouldn't even pass a basic safety test. Rebar spacing off, load-bearing beams undersized, insulation not up to code. It was a mess, and she'd signed off on all of it as HOA president. At one point, I noticed her husband watching me from the doorway, arms crossed, trying to intimidate me. "Careful where you poke around," he said. "Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." I met his glare. "I'm more worried about your tenants hurting themselves when this deck collapses." That shut him up. When I finished, I handed Corinne a yellow notice form. "Pending violation review," I said. "You'll receive a full report within 72 hours. Expect fines and possibly a stop work order." Her face went white. "You can't do that." I looked her dead in the eye. "I just did." Then I turned, walked back to my truck, and left her standing there, shaking with rage. By noon, I de-inspected 2 more properties in the HOA's fancy Lakeside section. One belonged to a board member who'd approved the demolition vote. His renovated home had a dozen safety violations, including illegal electrical work and an unlicensed contractor. Another belonged to Corinne's best friend, the treasurer. She deconverted her garage into an Airbnb suite without permits. Every one of them thought the rules didn't apply to them. By the time I got back to the county office, I had enough violations to fill a folder an inch thick. When Janelle saw me walk in, she grinned. "You look like a man who just found gold." "Oh, I did," I said, setting the folder on her desk. "We're about to have a field day." She flipped through the papers, her eyes widening. "Tom, this is bad. These aren't minor violations. These are shutdown-level offenses." "Exactly," I said. "And I've got evidence linking every one of them back to the HOA board, all signed off under Corinne's name." She gave a low whistle. "You're really going after them, huh?" I nodded. "They took something from me, now I'm taking something from them, their fake authority." That night, I drafted a formal report for county legal counsel. I attached the photos, inspection results, and a timeline of unauthorized activity. When I hit send, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: satisfaction. The system was slow, but it was steady. Once that report was in motion, the gears would turn: investigations, fines, maybe even lawsuits. Still, part of me wanted to see their faces when it hit. So the next morning, I drove back to Lakeside Estates, not for work, just to check on my property. As I parked near my cabin's remains, I noticed something strange. There were 2 black trucks by the HOA office, county trucks, Code Enforcement Division. And standing outside, red-faced and arguing with 2 officers, was Corinne. Even from across the lot, I could hear her shouting, "You can't shut down our projects. This is an overreach. I'll have your jobs for this." One of the officers, a friend of mine named Reggie, noticed me and waved. "Hey, Hale, nice timing." Corinne spun around, eyes blazing. "You," I smiled politely. "Morning, Mrs. Whitmore. Beautiful day for inspections, isn't it?" "You did this," she hissed. "You sicked the county on us." I shrugged. "No, Corinne, the law did this. I just followed it." She pointed a trembling finger at me. "You think you're clever, but you've made a powerful enemy," Reggie chuckled. "Ma'am, unless you've got more authority than the county code office, I'd suggest stepping back." Her face turned crimson. She spun and stormed back into her office, slamming the door behind her. Reggie turned to me, grinning. "Man, what did you do to that woman?" "Just my job," I said with a smirk. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a voice on the other end whispered, "Mr. Hale, you don't know what you've started. The HOA's been hiding things, big things. You need to be careful." I sat up straight. "Who is this?" The line went dead. For the first time since my cabin was demolished, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. This wasn't just corruption, it was cover-up territory. And whatever Corinne and her cronies were hiding, I was about to find it. "What do you think Corinne is hiding? If you were Tom, would you keep digging or walk away before things got dangerous?" That phone call haunted me all night. I replayed it in my head over and over, that trembling voice saying, "You don't know what you've started." Whoever it was sounded scared, not angry, terrified. By morning, I couldn't sit still. I grabbed my inspection folder, loaded my truck, and headed back toward the lake. Whatever Corinne's HOA was hiding, I was going to find it. As I drove past the gated entrance of Lakeside Estates, I noticed something new: a freshly placed restricted area construction zone sign near the south side of the lake. The thing is, there weren't supposed to be any construction permits within 500 feet of that shoreline. I pulled over, got out, and followed a dirt path that led toward the water. That's when I saw them: a line of orange plastic fencing, a bulldozer, and a couple of workers in reflective vests unloading pipes. One of them noticed me and called out, "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." I flashed my badge. "County Building Inspector, relax, I'm here to see the permit for this project." They exchanged nervous glances. One of them, a younger guy, maybe mid-20s, hesitated. You'll have to talk to the HOA office. We just work here." "Then tell me who hired you," I said. He looked down. "Merrill Construction." Of course, Corinne's husband's company. I walked closer to the excavation site, and what I saw made my stomach twist. They were digging a trench straight toward the lake. Dozens of thick PVC pipes snaked into the ground, half buried, leading into what looked like an underground pump system. I crouched down, brushing some dirt off a half-buried signpost that read, "Private Irrigation and Drainage Project, authorized by Lakeside HOA." There was no county seal, no signature, nothing official. That's when it hit me: they weren't just building illegally. They were diverting lake water. If those pipes were connected to the HOA's private irrigation or sewage lines, they were tampering with protected county waterways. That's a federal offense. I took a dozen photos and samples of the soil. Then, as I was getting ready to leave, I heard the low growl of an engine. A black SUV pulled up, kicking up dust. Corinne's husband, Mark, stepped out, followed by 2 other men in contractor vests. "Well, well," he said, walking toward me. "Looks like the county's finest just can't mind his own business." "Funny," I said, snapping another photo, "because this business happens to involve state environmental laws." He chuckled. "You think you're some kind of hero, huh? You don't know what you're stepping into." I know you're illegally diverting water from a protected reservoir, I said. And if you think that's not going to make the county or the EPA pay attention, you're dead wrong. His smile vanished. Put the camera down. I met his glare. Not a chance. He took a step closer, and I could feel the tension spike. The other two workers were watching, uneasy. Then one of them muttered, "Mark, just let him go, man. He's got a badge." Mark turned on him. "Shut up." That was all I needed. I took another photo, made a note of his license plate, and turned to leave. "Touch me and I'll have you in cuffs by noon," I said quietly. For a moment I thought he'd lunge at me, but he just clenched his jaw and stormed back to his SUV. "Enjoy your power trip, Hale," he spat. "You won't be smiling long." When I got back to the office, I went straight to the County Environmental Division. My friend Reggie met me there, flipping through the photos I'd taken. "Jesus," he muttered. "They're draining the lake to irrigate the subdivision lawns. That's protected water. This could tank the entire HOA." "Good," I said. "Let's make it official." We drafted a joint inspection notice: water code violations, unauthorized excavation, and environmental interference. It would hit the HOA like a ton of bricks, but before we could deliver it, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time, I put it on speaker. "Hale." A low, panicked voice answered, "Please stop digging into the lake project. They're covering up more than water issues." "Who is this?" I demanded. There was a pause, then, "Check the east storage unit by the HOA office. Tonight, don't tell anyone." The line went dead again. Reggie frowned. "Sounds like someone on the inside." "Yeah," I said, pocketing my phone. "And if they're risking that kind of call, whatever's in that storage unit must be worth hiding." That night, just after sunset, I parked a few blocks from the HOA office and walked the rest of the way. The air was heavy, the lake still. The security lights buzzed softly. Behind the office was a fenced lot with several storage units marked HOA maintenance only. One of them, the far east one, had a new padlock and a camera aimed directly at it. I crouched behind a dumpster, thinking. I wasn't about to break in, not yet, but I could take a closer look. Just then, a maintenance truck pulled up. A worker got out, unlocked the storage unit, and wheeled in two heavy boxes. When he left, he forgot to relatch the lock completely. I waited until he drove off. My pulse was hammering. I slipped over, gently pushed the latch aside, and opened the door just enough to peek inside. There were rows of metal shelves filled with boxes labeled HOA Legal Do Not Disclose, Property Acquisition Records, County Correspondence. And then one box caught my eye. It had my name on it. "Hale, Lot 52C." I stepped closer, heart pounding, and opened it. Inside were photos of my cabin, legal forms with forged signatures, and a document titled Emergency Structure Removal Justification County Copy. The problem? It wasn't the county's copy, it was a fake. And whoever forged it had used my signature. My stomach dropped. They hadn't just demolished my cabin illegally, they'd forged official documents to make it look legal. That's when I heard a click behind me. "Find what you were looking for?" I froze. Corinne's voice echoed from the doorway. She stood there, holding a flashlight, and beside her, Mark with that same smug, dangerous grin. "You really should have stopped when we told you," she said quietly. "What would you do if you caught powerful people forging your signature to cover their crimes? Would you confront them on the spot, or gather more proof and take them down legally? Find what you were looking for?" Her voice slithered through the dark storage room like a blade through silk. I turned slowly, every instinct screaming, "Stay calm." Corinne stood in the doorway, her pearl necklace glinting in the flashlight's beam. Behind her, Mark leaned against the frame, holding a crowbar loosely in one hand, just casual enough to look deliberate. "I should have known," Corinne said, stepping closer. "Man like you doesn't just stop when he's told." I glanced at the open box labeled Hale, Lot 52C inside. Those forged documents stared back at me like ghosts, proof of everything they'd done. "Looks like you've been busy," I said, forcing a calm smile. "Forging county paperwork now? That's a bold move." Mark scoffed. "You think you're some hero with that badge, huh? Always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "I think I'm the only person here not committing a felony," I shot back. Corinne's voice turned cold. "You really don't understand, do you? You've threatened everything we've built here, this community." "Community?" I cut her off. "You mean your cash cow? You've been extorting residents, falsifying permits, and using HOA funds to build illegal infrastructure. Don't dress it up like civic duty." For a split second, her mask slipped. The confident HOA queen was gone, replaced by something raw, angry, and cornered. "You think anyone will believe you?" she hissed. "You broke into private property. I can call the sheriff right now." I tilted my head. "Go ahead, but when they show up and see county evidence boxes labeled with forged signatures, I doubt I'll be the one in handcuffs." Her eyes darted to the open box. That tiny flicker of panic told me I'd hit the mark. Mark stepped forward, crowbar lowering toward the ground. "You know, accidents happen on construction sites. Maybe you tripped, hit your head, people would believe it." I kept my voice steady. "You touch me and that's assault on a county officer. You'll be in jail before sunrise." We stood there in the dark, 3 people, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then from outside, headlights flashed through the slats of the storage shed. Karen froze, Mark turned toward the noise, and I didn't waste the chance. I shoved the box off the shelf, papers flying everywhere, and bolted past them. Mark swung the crowbar, missing by inches. I ducked low, slammed through the half-open door, and sprinted into the night. Behind me, Karen screamed, "Stop him! Get him!" I didn't look back. My only thought was get to the truck. I rounded the corner of the HOA office just as 2 more figures appeared near the parking lot, security guards. They shouted something, but I was already moving, adrenaline cutting through my fear. My hand hit the door handle, and I dove into the driver's seat, slamming the locks down. The engine roared to life. In my rearview mirror, I saw Mark's SUV lurch forward, headlights blazing. "Oh, hell no," I muttered, flooring it. The gravel road exploded under my tires as I tore out of the HOA lot, their SUV following close behind. My truck fishtailed once, but I held steady. The lake glimmered to my right, the woods closing in fast. They were gaining on me. Mark's voice echoed faintly behind me, carried by the wind. "You can't run from us forever, Hale." I gritted my teeth. "Watch me." A sharp turn ahead, I took it hard, skidding onto the old access road that led toward my cabin site. It was rough, narrow, and half-hidden, but I knew it better than anyone. Their headlights vanished behind me for a second as I cut through the trees. My heart hammered in my ears. Finally, I reached the clearing, the empty patch where my cabin once stood. I killed the lights and coasted to a stop, breathing hard. For a long moment, all I could hear was my pulse and the distant hum of their SUV, searching. Then silence. They must have turned back. I exhaled, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. I was safe, for now, but the box, the proof, it was still back in that storage unit. And I knew Karen. She'd burn every piece of evidence before morning. I pulled out my phone and called Reggie. He answered on the second ring. "Tom, it's midnight, man. What's going on?" "Listen carefully," I said, voice low and urgent. "They forged county documents to justify the demolition. I saw them, my signature, fake permits, everything, but they caught me in the act." "Wait, what? Are you okay?" "Yeah, barely, but we've got one shot before they destroy the evidence. I need a search warrant for the HOA office. Tonight." Reggie cursed under his breath. "That's not easy. Judges don't sign warrants at midnight unless it's life or death. It's corruption, Reggie. Federal-level fraud and environmental tampering. If they torch those files, we lose everything." There was a pause, then I heard him sigh. "All right, I'll call in a favor. Sit tight and stay out of sight." I ended the call and leaned back, staring at the dark water where my cabin used to stand. This had started as revenge, me getting even for what they took from me. But now it was bigger. They'd been stealing from the county, from homeowners, from the law itself. And if they were desperate enough to forge official documents, who knew what else they'd done? I watched the lake ripple under the moonlight and whispered, "You picked the wrong guy to screw with, Karen." 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. It was Reggie. "Got it," he said. "Judge signed the warrant. We're rolling out in the morning. You'll want to be there." I smiled faintly. "Wouldn't miss it. Be careful, Tom. People like this, when they're cornered, they bite." He wasn't wrong. When I hung up, I glanced at the dirt where my cabin once stood. Something caught the light, a half-buried nail, rusted but sturdy. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. "Tomorrow," I murmured, slipping it into my pocket, "we rebuild." But just as I started the engine, a flash of movement by the tree line caught my eye. A shadow, tall, still, watching me. Before I could react, my phone buzzed again, a text message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have gone back. They know where you live." My blood went cold. I looked up again. The shadow was gone. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about corruption anymore. This was war. What would you do if the people you exposed started hunting you down? Would you keep fighting for justice or go into hiding? The next morning, the lake was shrouded in fog, the kind that makes the world feel quiet before a storm. I hadn't slept. Every sound outside my house made me jump. Message, "They know where you live," kept flashing in my mind like a warning light, but fear had turned to focus. By sunrise, Reggie's convoy rolled up my driveway, 2 county sheriff SUVs, 1 environmental enforcement van, and an unmarked black sedan carrying a court official. Reggie stepped out, coffee in one hand, warrant folder in the other. "Morning, Hale," he said grimly. "Ready to rattle some cages?" I forced a tired grin. "Been waiting for this since the day they bulldozed my cabin." He nodded toward the convoy. "Then let's go make it official." We arrived at Lakeside Estates around 7:00 a.m. The fog still clung to the road as residents peeked from behind their blinds, murmuring about the flashing lights and government plates. Karen's kingdom was about to crumble, and everyone was going to see it. The HOA office sat on the main loop, picture perfect with white siding and blue shutters. But today it looked like a crime scene waiting to happen. As we approached, 2 security guards stepped out front. "Office is closed," one said quickly. Reggie flashed his badge. "Not anymore. County Sheriff's Office. We have a search warrant signed by Judge Tanner." He handed over the document. The The guards exchanged uneasy looks, then stepped aside. Inside, Karen sat at her desk, phone pressed to her ear. She froze when she saw me walk in behind the sheriff. "Well, this is a surprise," she said, her voice sharp but trembling. I wasn't aware the county conducted witch hunts now. Reggie's tone was cool. "We're here for HOA records related to property demolitions, construction permits, and financial transfers." Karen's smile was tight. "Everything's in order. I'll need to call our lawyer before she could finish. One of the deputies called out from the hallway. "Sir, you might want to see this." We followed him into the back room, the same one I'd broken into last night. Only this time, everything was different. The shelves were empty, boxes gone, just faint rectangles of dust where they used to sit. Karen appeared behind us, arms crossed. "See, nothing to hide." My chest tightened. She demoved it all. Reggie looked at me, frowning. "You sure this is the place?" "Positive," I said. "They were right here, dozens of boxes, labeled, categorized, everything." Karen shrugged. "Maybe you were dreaming." But then one of the deputies pointed toward the corner. "Hold on, looks like we've got something." He crouched down and pried open a maintenance hatch in the floor. Inside was a narrow crawl space and the faint gleam of a metal box. Karen's expression cracked for the first time. The deputy hauled it out, setting it on a table. Reggie opened it. Inside were USB drives, paper receipts, and two small ledgers. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Karen's. "Looks like your dream had good details," Reggie murmured, flipping through the pages. Karen lunged forward. "You have no right." The sheriff stepped between us. "Ma'am, please stand back. You're interfering with an active investigation." Her composure shattered. "You can't do this. I'm on the board. I own this community." Reggie glanced up. "Not anymore, you don't." For the next 2 hours, we combed through every inch of the HOA office. The files told a story uglier than I'd imagined. Fake invoices, double-billed homeowners, bribes to county inspectors who'd conveniently ignored violations, even offshore accounts. But the biggest smoking gun was on one of the USB drives, scanned documents showing forged demolition orders with my name and signature. "Gotcha," I whispered under my breath. When I showed Reggie, he gave a low whistle. "They forged your authorization and sent it through the old digital submission portal. No wonder the demolition got flagged as approved. This is serious federal time." I turned to Karen. Her face had gone pale. "You forged my name," I said quietly. "You destroyed my home, then tried to make it look like I did it myself. You have any idea what that does to a man?" For the first time, her voice faltered. "You don't understand. It was supposed to be simple, just a replacement lot project. Mark said it was routine. I didn't—" "Don't," I snapped. "You knew exactly what you were signing." She looked like she wanted to argue, but then the sound of boots echoed through the hall, another deputy carrying in Mark, hands cuffed behind his back. "Caught him trying to load boxes into his truck," the deputy reported. "Said it was old trash. Guess the trash talks." Mark glared at me, his jaw tight. "This isn't over, Hale. You think this ends with a few files? You don't know who's really behind this." Reggie frowned. "That a threat, Mr. Merrow?" Mark smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just a prediction." Outside, the morning fog began to lift. Dozens of residents had gathered by the sidewalk, whispering as the deputies carried out boxes of evidence. Mrs. Whitmore, the elderly woman who'd always waved at me when I used to visit my cabin, called out, "What's going on? Are they arresting Karen?" I hesitated, then said loud enough for everyone to hear, "The HOA's been running illegal projects and forged county documents. The law's finally catching up." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some looked shocked, others relieved. Karen was let out in cuffs moments later. Her perfect suburban mask was gone, mascara streaked, hair disheveled, muttering under her breath about mistakes and revenge. As she passed me, she stopped for a moment. "You think you've won," she hissed, "but you have no idea how deep this goes." I leaned in slightly. "Then I'll just keep digging." Her eyes flashed with hatred before the deputies guided her toward the cruiser. Back at the county office, we began cataloging the evidence. Reggie was already on the phone with the DA, coordinating with state investigators. But as I scanned through the files on one of the USB drives, something strange caught my eye, a series of encrypted folders labeled Project Meridian. Each one contained land deeds, corporate filings, and confidential emails, not from the HOA, but from Merrow Construction and several shell companies tied to a developer out of state. I frowned. "Reggie, take a look at this." He leaned over. "What the hell is that?" "Whatever it is," I said slowly, "it's bigger than a crooked HOA. These files show plans for land acquisitions across 3 counties, all near protected lakes. This was never about one cabin. It's about control of the water." Reggie stared at the screen. "You're saying they've been setting this up for years?" I nodded grimly. "And if Mark's right, someone higher up is pulling the strings." That night after the dust settled, I stood at the lake again, staring at the calm water that had once reflected my cabin lights. For the first time, it felt like justice was finally moving. But deep down, I knew Karen's last words weren't empty. Because somewhere out there, someone had just realized their operation was compromised, and they'd be coming next. If you uncovered corruption that reached beyond your local HOA into corporations and politics, would you keep pushing or walk away before it got dangerous? The next few days felt like living in a movie I didn't audition for. Karen and Mark were in custody, but their arrest only stirred the hornet's nest. The deeper I dug into Project Meridian, the uglier it got. Reggie and I spent hours combing through the encrypted files from the HOA raid. They weren't just documents, they were maps, correspondence, and bank transfers, all pointing to something far bigger. Each file referenced one of three counties, all with lakes, reservoirs, or groundwater protection zones. And each area had community redevelopment projects linked to shell companies under Merrow Construction. I clicked through one folder labeled Confidential Phase III. Inside were scanned blueprints, signed by someone named R. Linton, CEO of Linton Waterworks, a private infrastructure firm that had recently landed several state contracts. "Reggie," I said slowly, "this guy Linton, he's not local, is he?" He looked up from his laptop. "No, he's out of Capital City, heavy hitter, donates to half the politicians in the state." "Why?" I turned the screen toward him. "Because his signature's on this." Reggie leaned in, squinting. That's the same company that tried to privatize the East County Reservoir 2 years ago." "Exactly," I said. "They're trying again, but this time through HOA fronts. They fake demolitions, seize abandoned lots, then redevelop the land using fake environmental projects, all under the radar." Reggie blew out a low whistle. "You're saying Karen and Mark were just pawns? Pawns with a salary," I said, "and Linton's the king." By noon, I was in my office, staring at the documents spread across my desk like a crime board. Each connection felt like another layer of rot beneath the surface. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hale." A deep, calm voice replied. "Mr. Hale, I think we need to talk." "Who is this?" "Someone with an interest in keeping the peace. You've been making a lot of noise about Project Meridian." My stomach tightened. "Linton," he chuckled softly. "Smart man, I've read your reports, you're thorough, but this," his tone sharpened, "this isn't your fight anymore." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what Karen said before we found the forged permits." "You've made your point," Linton continued. "The Merrows crossed lines they weren't authorized to. They'll face consequences, but you'd be wise to stop digging." I leaned back in my chair. "You destroyed my cabin, forged my name. You think I'm going to just walk away because you said please?" There was a pause, long and cold. "Your cabin was collateral," he said finally. "An unfortunate accident in a much larger operation, but accidents happen every day, Mr. Hale, some even fatal." The line went dead. That night, I didn't go home. I knew better. I drove out to Reggie's office instead. He was still there, coffee in one hand, eyes bloodshot from staring at screens. "You look like hell," he said. "Got a call from Linton," I replied flatly. That got his attention. "He called you?" "Yeah, basically told me to back off or something bad might happen." Reggie swore under his breath. "This guy's untouchable, Tom. He's got friends in the state board, the media, the banks. You take him on directly, you're going to need more than an inspection badge." "I don't care," I said. "He's covering up crimes that cost people their homes, mine included. I'm not stopping until he answers for it." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, then let's do it right." We spent the next few days quietly compiling everything. Reggie reached out to a contact in the state attorney's office, a woman named Linda Cho, known for tackling environmental corruption. When we met her, she didn't waste time. "You're telling me a private company used HOAs to launder property deals and divert county water sources?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I said, handing her the USB. "This is the proof. Permits, payments, fake demolitions, even my forged signature." She plugged it in, scanning through the files. Her expression darkened with every click. "My God," she muttered. "This isn't just fraud, this is racketeering." Reggie smirked. "That word's music to my ears." Linda nodded. "You leave this with me, we'll open a grand jury investigation. But Mr. Hale, be careful. Once this moves, they'll know who pushed the first domino." The following morning, I returned home for the first time in days. The place felt different, quieter, heavier. I locked the doors, closed the blinds, and checked the security cameras twice. Then, around midnight, the motion alert pinged on my phone. Someone was outside. I pulled up the feed, a black SUV idling near my driveway. Same model Mark used. Same tinted windows. My pulse spiked. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out quietly, heart thundering. The air was cold and still. The SUV's headlights flicked on, then off again. "Come on," I muttered, inching closer. Suddenly the engine revved and the vehicle tore off down the road, tires screeching. When I checked the gravel afterward, I found it, a small, sealed envelope taped to my mailbox. Inside was a photo of me and Reggie leaving the attorney's office earlier that day, printed in black and white. No message, no sender, just a silent warning, we see you. By morning, I was back at the county building. I wasn't scared anymore, I was furious. Reggie saw me storm in and muttered, "You got the look of a man about to do something stupid." "Maybe," I said, "but it's time we stop reacting, we take it public." He frowned. "Public how?" I pointed to the local news channel playing on the lobby TV. "If the courts move too slow, we make the people move faster." He smiled grimly. "You really think they'll listen?" I met his gaze. "They demolished a man's home under false pretenses and poisoned a lake to feed corporate greed. Trust me, they'll listen." That afternoon, I called a reporter I trusted, Dana Miles, the same one who once covered my county investigations. When she heard the name Project Meridian, she didn't hesitate. "You've got documents?" "Everything," I said. "Names, dates, and proof of fraud," she exhaled sharply. "All right, Hale, I'll give you airtime, but you'd better be ready for what comes after." "I've been ready since the bulldozer hit my front porch." That night under studio lights, I sat across from Dana as she introduced the story. A shocking county investigation reveals that a private development company, Linton Waterworks, may have used multiple HOAs to illegally seize land and reroute protected water sources. The whistleblower, a county building inspector whose own home was demolished, joins us live. When she turned to me, I looked straight into the camera. "They thought no one would notice," I said calmly. "They thought people like me would stay quiet, but corruption grows in silence and it ends when someone finally speaks up." After the interview aired, everything exploded. Phones rang off the hook. Reporters camped outside the county office. And by morning, the headlines were everywhere. "County inspector exposes multi-million-dollar land scheme. State launches investigation into Linton Waterworks." It felt like victory until Reggie called. His voice was tense. "Tom, we've got a problem." Linda Cho's office was broken into last night. The USB drive gone. My blood ran cold. "What?" "They knew exactly what to take," he said. "And there's more. Someone hacked into the county server this morning. The Project Meridian files, they're all wiped." I stood there in silence, realization hitting like a punch to the chest. Linton wasn't just powerful, he was untouchable. And now I was the only one left with the truth. If you were in Tom's shoes, hunted, silenced, but still holding the truth, would you keep fighting or disappear to protect yourself? The next 24 hours felt like a bad dream that refused to end. The state attorney's office had been broken into. The USB gone, the county servers wiped clean. Every trace of Project Meridian had vanished like it never existed. But I knew it was real, and I knew who was behind it. Reggie slammed his coffee mug on the table. "They must have had an inside man. No one gets through the courthouse without clearance." I rubbed my temples, exhausted but burning with rage. "They're covering their tracks, every file, every document. If we don't move fast, this whole thing disappears and we go down with it." Reggie leaned forward. "Then we make our own record, offline, untouchable." I looked up. "You mean go rogue?" He nodded. "Exactly. We gather what's left, duplicate what we can, and expose it directly to the public again." No courts, no red tape. I sat back, considering it. As a county inspector, it went against every instinct to bypass the system I'd sworn to uphold, but the system had already been corrupted. "All right," I said finally. "Let's finish what we started." That night we met in Reggie's garage, the kind of place that smelled like oil, dust, and old determination. We set up 2 laptops, several backup drives, and a printer that sounded like it belonged in the 90s. On the table lay a thick folder, my personal copies of everything from the HOA raid. Reggie powered up the external drive. "Let's see what survived." Half the files were corrupted, but some opened. They weren't the detailed ledgers or payment logs we'd lost, but the satellite maps and environmental reports were still there, enough to prove illegal land modification and water redirection. "Not perfect," he said, "but enough to start a fire." I scanned the papers, my jaw tightening. "Then we make it count." By dawn, we'd built what we called the mirror file, a full offline archive of every surviving document, time-stamped and notarized through an independent data verifier. It wasn't just evidence, it was insurance. Reggie looked up at me. "You realize once this goes live, you're a marked man." "I've been marked since the day they leveled my cabin," I said. "I'm done hiding." He gave a grim smile. "Then let's make it loud." We uploaded an encrypted teaser file to a secure whistleblower site, one that would automatically release the full archive to major outlets if anything happened to us. The post read, "Project Meridian, a statewide conspiracy to seize and privatize water resources through HOA corruption and forged county permits. Documents attached. Full release pending confirmation." Within hours, the site started trending. Anonymous messages poured in, some supportive, some threatening. Then late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a blocked call. "Mr. Hale," the familiar deep voice said, "that was a very unwise move." I didn't flinch. "You should have thought of that before stealing from the people." You're making this harder on yourself. You think a few files will bring down a company like Linton Waterworks. You don't even have the real evidence anymore. Wrong, I said. I've got backups and a failsafe. You touch me or Reggie and the entire world gets the full package. Silence. Then a quiet, dangerous chuckle. Very well, Linton said. If you want a war, you'll get one. The line went dead. 2 nights later, the war began. Reggie's house was broken into while he was away. Nothing stolen, just trashed. His laptop smashed. A clear message, we can reach you anytime. Then came the smear campaign. Fake news articles accusing me of falsifying permits, accepting bribes, even retaliatory demolition fraud. They were trying to flip the narrative, paint me as the villain. But I was ready for that. I called Dana, the reporter. They're trying to bury me. I've seen it, she said. Half these stories are coming from shell news accounts. Someone's paying to control the narrative. Then let's take it live, I said. One more interview, but this time I bring everything. The next day we set up in a small independent studio outside the city. No sponsors, no corporate ties, just truth. Dana looked at me from across the table. You know they'll come after you harder this time, right? I know, I said, but I'm not the one who should be scared. When the cameras rolled, I laid it all out, the HOA fraud, the forged documents, the destroyed evidence, and now the intimidation campaign. I showed the satellite photos, the environmental violations, and copies of the county permits with Linton's company listed as a hidden stakeholder. By the time I finished, Dana's eyes were wide. Mr. Hale, she said quietly, this is going to change everything. I met the camera lens. Good, because people like Linton count on silence. I won't give it to them. That interview went viral within hours. Tens of thousands of shares, comments pouring in. This man's a hero. Expose every one of them. Protect him, they'll try to shut him up next. But amidst the support came a chilling reminder of how powerful my enemy was. At 11:47 p.m., a drone appeared outside my living room window, hovering silent. Its camera light blinked red, recording. I stood there, staring it down, refusing to move. Then it zipped away into the night. My phone buzzed seconds later, another unknown message. You're running out of time. The next morning, I met Reggie in a diner outside town. He looked tired, paranoid, glancing out the window every few seconds. They're not just following us, Tom, he said quietly. They're buying silence. 2 of our contacts at the county just resigned. One of them got a payout from a Linton subsidiary. So it's just us, I said. He nodded. Us and the public, and that's what they can't control anymore. We sat there in silence for a long moment before I said, if we're going to end this, we need to hit them where it hurts. Meaning? Their money, I said. If we expose how they've been laundering their development cash through dummy HOAs, the IRS and state auditors will swarm them. Forget lawyers, they'll have accountants tearing them apart. Reggie grinned slowly. You're thinking like a true inspector now. That night I went back to my cabin site one last time. The moon reflected on the lake, calm and silver, just like the first night I'd bought the property. Except now there was no cabin, just the scar where it used to stand. I stood there for a long time, letting the anger fade into focus. This ends tomorrow, I said out loud as if the lake was listening. And then I heard it, the crunch of gravel behind me. Headlights flicked on, a car engine idled, a voice called out from the darkness. Mr. Hale, step away from the water. I turned slowly, my pulse steady. It wasn't police, it was Reggie. It was a man in a suit, flanked by 2 others. Who are you? I asked. The lead man smiled faintly. We represent Linton Waterworks. Mr. Linton would like a word privately. My jaw tightened. Tell him he can find me in court. The man's smile didn't fade. Oh, I'm afraid that's not an option anymore. He reached inside his coat, and that's when I saw it, a flash of metal. If you were face to face with the people who destroyed your life and now they're threatening it, what would you do? Would you stand your ground or strike first? The man's hand hovered near his jacket, that glint of metal catching the moonlight. My pulse quickened, but I didn't move. I wasn't about to die in the same spot they destroyed my father's dream. Easy, I said quietly. Whatever you're planning, you don't want to do it here. The man smiled. I'm afraid this isn't a negotiation, Mr. Hale. He nodded to the others. They started walking toward me, slow, deliberate steps crunching over gravel. Then out of nowhere, a blinding light swept across the lot. County Sheriff, hands where I can't see them. The 3 men froze, caught like deer in headlights. A convoy of police vehicles screeched to a stop behind them, sirens slicing through the night. From behind one of the SUVs stepped Sheriff Cortez, hand on his sidearm. You picked the wrong inspector to mess with, gentlemen. I exhaled, finally lowering my hands. The men were cuffed and shoved against their car. One of them started shouting, You don't know who you're dealing with. We work for Linton, Cortez interrupted dryly. Yeah, we figured. He turned to me. You okay? Better than I've been in months, I said. How did you? Anonymous tip, he said, smirking. Someone sent us GPS coordinates, said a group of men were on their way to intimidate a county official. Sender's name was R. Dalton. Ring any bells, Reggie? That old fox had done it again. 2 days later, the arrests went public. Not just the 3 men at the lake, but half a dozen more, all connected to Linton Waterworks, the Lakeside HOA, and a private security contractor tied to illegal development enforcement. Turns out, the goons who tore down my cabin weren't just following orders. They were part of a pattern demolishing properties near water zones under safety claims, then selling the land for resort expansions. But here's the part that truly made my blood run cold. The permits authorizing those demolitions were digitally signed by me, forged, perfect copies of my credentials and seal. They hadn't just taken my home, they'd tried to use my own authority to justify it. By the time I met with the state attorney, the case had exploded. Multiple news outlets picked up Dana's story. Public outrage was off the charts. In the conference room, Reggie sat across from me, still bruised from his close calls but grinning ear to ear. "You started a fire," he said. "Now they're choking on the smoke." The attorney, a stern woman named Clark, nodded. "We're preparing a full indictment: corporate fraud, racketeering, property destruction, environmental tampering, and conspiracy to intimidate a public official." "Will it stick?" I asked. Clark looked at me over her glasses. "Oh, it'll stick. Especially since your little mirror file automatically uploaded to 5 news servers when the arrests went down." "Nicely done, Inspector," Reggie chuckled. "Told you the failsafe would come in handy." A week later, the courtroom was packed. Cameras everywhere. Every HOA board member in their best suit sitting stiff beside Linton himself, smug, polished, and trying to act unbothered. But when the prosecution started playing the recorded call, his voice ordering the demolition of unauthorized structures, that calm mask cracked. I watched him shift in his seat, jaw tightening, eyes darting toward his lawyer. Then came the financial records, the shell companies, the bribes, the land transfers, every piece of their corruption laid bare. Linton's lawyer objected, but it was useless. The evidence was airtight. Finally, Clark turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't about property disputes or zoning confusion. This was greed, organized, deliberate, and destructive greed that cost innocent people their homes, their land, their trust." When the verdict came in, I didn't breathe until the words hit the air. Guilty on all counts. Linton's face went pale. The board members slumped. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Justice, real, tangible justice, had finally arrived. Afterward, I stepped outside the courthouse. Air felt lighter. Dana caught up to me with her mic, smiling. "Mr. Hale, any final words now that the case is over?" I looked past her, toward the skyline, the city that had once turned a blind eye, now buzzing with truth. "Yeah," I said softly. "Don't ever underestimate the little guy with the right knowledge. The rules only protect the powerful until someone who wrote them decides to fight back." She grinned. "Poetic, Inspector." "Just honest," I said. A month later, I returned to the lake. The county had seized the HOA's office property and leveled their illegal fences. My lot had been restored, graded flat again. Standing there, I felt peace for the first time since that terrible morning. A small work crew was already waiting, sent by volunteers who'd seen the story online. A local builder had offered to help rebuild the cabin, free of charge. "Ready to start over, Mr. Hale?" one of them asked. I smiled, looking out at the water. "Yeah. But this time we do it right with a proper inspection." They laughed, and I joined them. As they unloaded the lumber, I noticed a small wooden box sitting by the lake's edge. It was half-buried, waterlogged. Inside was a plaque from my old cabin, somehow spared from demolition. It read, "For Dad, the man who taught me how to build and why to stand tall when others try to tear it down." I wiped a tear, ran my fingers over the letters, and placed it gently on a new post. The sun broke through the clouds just then, warm and golden across the lake. And for the first time in months, I smiled without anger. What did you think of how Tom handled it? Would you have gone this far for justice or let it go? Comment below. I read every one of your thoughts. Sometimes karma doesn't come on its own. Sometimes you have to build it, one nail at a time.